Lexing, and welcome to the Carol Powell Lexing Show. This is a show that empowers you and connects you to pertinent issues affecting yourself, the community, and the country. And normally, before I actually get into our topics for the day, I always like to give an affirmation. And my favorite affirmation is basically that you are fearfully, you're wonderfully, and you're marvelously made by God. You are basically have a very strong light. Dim that light for no one. It is your destiny to shine. Now, today we are going to be discussing, I guess, a topic that seems to have no end. It just seems that our Supreme Court, our government, Congress, they can control a woman's rights, what the woman can do or not do with her body. They can make laws. They can enforce those laws regarding what a woman can and cannot do for her body. They can make laws and enforce laws regarding what we can read and not read. They can make laws and enforce laws about who a person is and what pronoun they're supposed to use or not use. But they can't get a handle on the number one killer of children in this country, and that is guns. And today we're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss it. And today I have a young man who is a solutionary hip hop artist turned Second Amendment activist from North Philly. He's known as the Prophet of Philadelphia, and he's the founder of Black Guns Matter, the Black Guns Matter movement in 2015. And he is a very outspoken advocate for gun rights. And that's good too, but we need to come up with some solutions regarding how do we get a handle and control over people that shouldn't have guns and just guns, period, because that's a very complex issue. And before we get into that, I want to just run down some statistics for you. In 2022, about 45% of the U.S. household had at least one gun in their possession. As of May 1st, at least 13,959 people have died from gun violence in the U.S. This year alone, I guess there have been 184 mass shootings. And I guess mass shootings are defined when four or more people or victims have been shot and killed by guns. Where do we go? How do we put a handle on that? Do people even understand what the Second Amendment says? Mr. Maj Toure is our guest for today, and we welcome you. And we would like to know, what is your take on and what type of solutions can we have? We know that you're a gun activist, or advocate for guns, but there must be some type of solution as to contain, so that we don't have all these mass shootings and definitely people going into schools killing these children. So what do you, just tell us a little something about yourself.
Yeah, well, you had the word right. I am a Second Amendment activist. I think a lot of times what happens is people, depending on what side of the aisle you are, this term activism can be portrayed incorrectly. I think that if you're active in your community, if you're active in your family, you're active in your outreach, I think that's a great thing. I think something has been presented as activism, which kind of isn't. When we just say things online or we upset, we don't inform ourselves and we don't actively involve ourselves in solutions. So, yes, I am a Second Amendment activist. And in that, there's a process of a tremendous amount of information. And to be honest, outright stat manipulation to make Second Amendment activism or people, especially in Black communities that want to have the means to keep in their home or bear arms to defend themselves, to make them keep, outside of that, the history of the racist practice of gun control, why it was started, how a lot of our elders, especially like in the South, how they utilized firearms to defend themselves from Klan members, from racists, from, slave patrol, so forth and so on. So that's kind of my background as the founder of Black Guns Matter. We are a self-defense and Second Amendment and firearms safety and conflict resolution organization. But what happens a lot of times is people become to have one of the extreme. They don't say, we have to do something about the unnecessary violence, ignorance, and negligence associated with the firearm, because that could be perceived as you're saying anti-gun things, or someone that may identify as anti-gun or may not just be very knowledgeable about firearms, they'll say, well, I don't think it's too bad for somebody to have the means to defend themselves. And some people says, oh, you must be a gun nut. So we just take more of a very well-rounded and balanced approach. And in doing so, it leads us down, that rabbit hole of the information and misinformation that is presented a lot of times as it relates to firearms. One of the things that you said earlier during the intro, as it relates to mass shootings, right? I live in Philadelphia, and about a year or two ago, we had two guys. One of them was a prominent, up-and-coming boxer, and he had issues with some guys down on South Street, which is, in the summertime in Philadelphia, is a very populated area. These guys kind of got into a scuffle. They separated. They came back and started shooting at each other, but more than 4 people were hit. And under that current definition of mass shooting, the media propagated that as a mass shooting. And in reality, it was 2 idiots that had firearms that were shooting at each other. And unfortunately, other people were shot and, some were killed. The way that a mass shooting is presented and the general public not knowing that definition of what a mass shooting is classified in and leaving certain levels of context out is what a lot of people that are advocating for more of the racist practice of gun control or anti-gun activists, they kind of like categorize those, situations, and they leave a little bit of the context out, which is a little bit unfair if we're generally trying to find answers and solutions from a balanced perspective. How do we cut down and mitigate and potentially stop the loss as it relates to death, ignorance, and suicides, which make up the vast majority of firearms deaths in America, while defending someone's human right to defend themselves? So our ability to do that has to have a balanced, honest, and objective approach, and that's kind of what how we educate at Black Guns Matter.
I want to ask you, you brought up, you said the racist practice of gun control. What does racism have to do with gun control?
Oh, it's the origin of it. It was started in America during the slave codes and the so-called black codes to stop Black people from having the means to defend themselves. A lot of times when, especially Southern human owners that we erroneously call slaves because we were humans that were captive, they pretty much wanted to make sure that these folks didn't have the means to defend themselves. If we're talking about state constitutions that were even amended, every able-bodied North Carolina, every able-bodied man should have a firearm. Scratch that and go, every able-bodied white man did not have the means to defend themselves, to fight against tyranny, whether that was someone escaping captivity and trying to make their way up to Philadelphia, where I live, from the Deep South, and having, Harriet Tubman. Obviously, everyone knows the story of Harriet Tubman carrying a firearm to get men and women to, freedom. But these rules were literally started then to make sure that Black people did not have the means to defend themselves. When you fast forward now, because some people will say, well, white people are subject to the same levels of gun control now. There's a great book by Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow. And in that book, she speaks about how racism goes from, just calling a person a slave to, the 13th Amendment in the prison industrial complex. Racism is intelligent. We don't need to say we want to make you a slave anymore. But if the outcome is the same, where we get, young Black men in jail, where you can be legally a slave now, we don't have to say we want it to be public people can buy Black folks and keep them as captives. We can say if you break a rule, you become a felon, we can now make you a slave. So what she said in that book was racism is smart and it evolves. It's the same thing with gun control. So now it won't just be, only the Blacks can't have a firearm. But what they'll do is they'll do certain things like try to price out your ability to get a license to carry, for a license for a constitutionally protected right? They'll do things like say...
Not necessarily constitutionally protected. Go ahead. Huh? I'm sorry. Not necessarily constitutionally protected. I know you're talking about the Second Amendment, which we're going to define in just a few minutes.
Yeah, well, the Bill of Rights is a part of the Constitution, and you have those rights are codified rights, human and natural rights codified in the framework of America, the right to freedom of speech being the first one, right? The Fourth Amendment, the right to not have, disrespectful searches and seizures to your body, your right to privacy. things were there created to make sure that black people did not have those means. And they try to double down on that by saying, well, you're not really citizens, you're denizens. And so when you fast forward, you got states like California that, even though this is a state issued license to carry for the state of California, areas like Compton, Oakland, areas where there's high levels of black folk, they have license rates issued way lower than places like Beverly Hills or Brentwood or places like that. So even though it's the same state issued license and there's more corruption and death and negligence in certain areas where people may need to have the means to defend themselves, but those are primarily black and brown communities, those are the areas where those licenses are issued less. And when there's predominantly white communities, the outcome is still the same. We as the government are trying to come up with ways, especially if you don't take us to court and fight us up to, maybe on an appellate level or whatever way up, how far up. We will create a statute that is pretty much in opposition to the supreme law of the land as it relates to the Constitution. Because how the Constitution and the Bill of Rights work is, if it's not enumerated in that Constitution and Bill of Rights, then as a nation, we leave it up to the states. But unfortunately, the Second Amendment is very clear. And when you double that down with black people being the primary target and the outcome, as the reference with Michelle Alexander, that racism being very smart and evolving, we don't have to say we don't want you black people to have guns anymore. We can just do strategic things to price you out, to not issue you a license, so forth and so on, which is another outcome, as well as then you have black people leading the league, for lack of a better term.
But don't you have a lot of white congressmen and a lot of white folks that pretty much are against gun control, regardless of what the race is? Isn't their primary focus is to not have any type of gun control, to try to, I haven't seen any type of laws or legislations that says, okay, only these people over here can have guns, only these people over here can't have guns. Have you seen that?
Well, these are the examples that I just gave. I said, when I used the Michelle Alexander reference, they don't have to say it anymore. Like redlining. Our communities are segregated. They don't say, only you blacks can be over here, like they used to do in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. They don't have to say that anymore if they structure a thing in the system. There's another great book called The Color of Law. It's by a Jewish dude, and he talks about how they utilize redlining to segregate, so forth and so on. And those invisible lines still exist. So I don't have to say this rule. We can enforce these rules in certain areas. The example that I gave about the state of California, when you get a license to carry, that is a state-issued license, but they deny, because it's not a shall issue state, they deny areas, people that want to be safe and responsible firearms owners and get a license to carry a firearm. They'll deny more black and brown people in those areas, even though it's a state issued license. So they don't have to say, oh, this is only for the blacks. The outcome is the same. Now, to your question of, do we see white folks advocating for, I wouldn't say for less gun control. They're advocating for
they're not.
Black people and white people's Second Amendment rights to be defended. Now, if they're saying black or white, it doesn't matter. What they're saying is, we have a structure in America, a Bill of Rights and a Constitution, and we should not be doing things that are infringing on those rights. If someone said, a congressman said, we want to come up with a license for you to tweet certain things or to say certain things, we would have a problem with that, because that First Amendment is in our Bill of Rights and in our Constitution. This is a constitutionally protected human right, just like the freedom of speech. But we would not dare ask our congressmen or our public servants and representatives to say, hey, we need to put more limits on people's speech in those spaces, because we would see how contradictory that would be. And so I just want to make sure that folks know, if you are going to be a firearms owner, you should be the most safe and responsible firearms owner you could be. You should get information, you should get training, and you should do all of those things. The government does not need to tell you how to be a good parent. The government should not be telling you how to be a safe and responsible firearms owner. Professionals should.
But
I think that at the same.
But do you think? Do you think the government should have a ban on assault weapons?
No.
Why is that?
Well,
because they are a danger to public safety. Assault,
no, they're not. Do you shoot?
A regular civilian does not need an assault weapon.
What's an assault weapon?
An assault weapon is those AK-47s, those weapons that you can 30 or 40 magazine rounds in a second will kill someone. Why does a person need an assault?
Stop. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's not what that is.
Okay.
I want to see, my job as an informer and an educator is to make sure that we're presenting information to the people.
Well, I need you to define what an assault weapon is.
I'm going to do that. An assault, that weapon, that term is made up. It's not real. It's just something that people say. Nowhere in firearms lexicon was there something created called an assault rifle. The reason why that started to take prominence is because the platform is called an AR, and people associate that with the letter A with assault and R, rifle. The company that created that was called Armalite, and the model was 15. That's where that came from. So when someone says these assault rifles don't need to be on the street, as we also say, we are living in a corrupt and racist system, you're almost advocating for only the law enforcement people to have that type of firearm, when in reality, why would we only want the police that are corrupt to have the type of firearm that we need to defend ourselves from portions of corrupt police and criminals?
Well, so how many criminals use AK-47s? Burglarizing homes, robbing banks.
Again, we've clarified that an AK-47 is not an assault rifle. That's not that term is made up. That's just something that people say.
Well, what is an AK-47?
It's an Automakov Kalashnikov 47, named after the person that made it from Russia in the year 1947. That's what that stands for.
But it's a gun that shoots a lot of rounds at one time, and
no, that's not.
That's not true either.
No, it's not. It's a semi-automatic rifle. Semi-automatic means one time I press the trigger, one bullet comes out. That's what semi-automatic means.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, this firearm right here, right, is a semi-automatic pistol.
Mm-hmm.
If this gun is clear, by the way, I want everybody to know that there's no bullets in here.
Okay.
If I press this trigger one time, one bullet will come out. Half semi of the work is done for you. If I want another bullet to come out to defend myself and my life and my family and loved ones, I have to press the trigger again. That is the same thing with an AK-47, a semi-automatic AK-47.
Now, what type of rifles are being used in these mass killings? Like, what type of rifle was used in Sandy Hook?
Well,
in Uvalde last year.
You mean the one that was used to kill the bad guy, or the one that the bad guy used?
I'm talking about the ones that the bad guy used to kill those children. What type of gun was that? What do you call that?
I'm pretty sure that may have been an AR-15, and it was still a semi-automatic, meaning one round, one bullet. Fully automatic firearms go through a rigorous process, and they're legal in America, but they're very, very expensive because of legislation in 1986. So most of the shootings, actually, and the death that happens in our communities, in America generally, 60% of the deaths associated with firearms annually are suicides. This is another part that I think we could do our communities a very, very good solid if we started focusing on the biggest number of deaths, which is 60%, which is someone that does not feel whole from whatever background, that decides to take a firearm and take their life. That's 60%.
But we're not seeing that. We see people taking firearms, going to schools, killing innocent children.
That's not true.
Going to theaters, killing people, going to concerts, shooting down people like in Las Vegas.
What you're saying, we got to deal with numbers.
We are numbers. Okay.
60% of the deaths annually with firearms are suicides. You cannot refute that with your feelings. That is a fact. That's not me making it up. Everybody can look at the Department of Justice statistics as well as the FBI statistics. 60% of all of the deaths associated with firearms are suicides. But no one talks about that. Why aren't we reaching out to these young people to make them feel whole and get them before they start killing themselves and, in other instances, other people?
Because I think it's important that people that are going out killing other people, if I hate to say this, if they want to kill themselves, as long as they're not going out killing other folks, I don't don't think people are going to have a problem with that. But the problem becomes when you have these AR-15s and they go to these schools and they kill these children, or they go and kill innocent people that are minding their own business. That's where the problem comes in. And the question becomes, should people have access to AR-15s? Why aren't these guns being banned?
We should stop. If under that logic, we should also make sure that we stop police officers for having those AR-15s too, correct?
We should stop a civilian from having an AR-15 because you do not need that. A hunter does not need an AR-15 because they're going to shoot the smithereens their prey.
You're not answering my question. Should law enforcement, racist police, have AR-15s and not black people?
Are all police racist? I mean, I do. I trust me. I understand where you're coming from, but the question becomes: are all police officers racist? Huh?
Should law enforcement be restricted from those firearms too?
The police should not be restricted from those firearms because they are trained as to how to handle those firearms. An average civilian is not trained how to. I'm not trained how to handle an AR-15. Why would I need an AR-15 to go and shoot up people? The problem is not dealing with a person with suicide. The problem is dealing with people that take these guns and go out and kill innocent people minding their own business and using these AR-15s and using guns that's going to put people, kill them, and just, what do you call it? Just their bodies are just going to be just totally just to smithereens. Those type of guns. We don't need those guns here. And the second, and let me tell you, the Second Amendment does not say that you have a right to have an AR-15. You do not have a right to have a gun like that. You have a right to bear arms.
Data. It is not based on science. It is not based on facts.
I am basing it on reality. I'm not using statistics. I'm basing it on the United States, even the Supreme Court.
If you're just saying things that are incorrect. What you're saying is not factual. I asked you, do you train? You don't know the definition of an AR. You don't know. You did not know.
I do know the definition of AR-15. I know what I see. I know that there is a gun that go out and shoot people and put people and shoot them and killing them, and their bodies are in smithereens. Their parts are all broken up. You can't identify them. I do know that. That's reality.
Think it's true, but you don't.
But you can't. But you cannot make one-sided argument about police only having AR-15s and civilians like yourself and myself.
That we have to ask ourselves: if we're not going to answer that question from a balanced perspective while preserving life, then there's no reason to have this conversation. I cannot have a conversation with someone that does not train, that clearly does not study, does not know the data and statistics, and is just going to repeat incorrect talking points. I am here to help defend our people, save life, get the biggest amount of lives saved while preserving human rights and your right to defend yourselves from weirdos, rapists, so forth and so on. So a lot of
But I don't need an AR-15 to defend myself against a rapist.
Now have been 100% false, and it's almost like a dangerous lie. It's a dangerous lie, and you have a responsibility on your platform to not lie.
I'm not lying. I'm just speaking reality. I'm speaking reality. Yeah, I am. So you can't tell millions of people that they're not seeing what they see.
You didn't study for this.
You can tell millions of people. You don't have to study to see what a gun kills somebody. An AR-15.
You don't know the data. How many times a year are there non-lethal firearms being presented to defend life per year annually? Do you know that answer?
Non-lethal weapons being used to defend. We're not talking about non-lethal weapons. We're talking about a ban on weapons
you're
like AR-15s.
You're not listening, and that's the problem.
I'm listening to you.
Not the subject matter expert. I
am listening to you, but it doesn't take an expert or a scientist or anyone. It takes common sense. And that's what's lacking in Congress. And that's what's lacking with people who are activists and advocates for gun control.
How many times annually is a firearm used and presented to defend life and no life is taken? That's the question.
How many? What? Say that again.
How many times a year annually does someone present a firearm, no one dies, and they defend life? How many? They're called defensive gun usages. How many defensive gun usages that do not take life.
Well, you
happen
can.
annually in America.
Let me just tell you, you can have guns and people can mute.
You're not answering the question. I asked
You
a very
can have
direct
guns and a person can be responsible, a responsible gun
didn't
owner.
answer. You're
But
evading the-
I'm talking
I asked
about
you-
people that are not responsible gun owners that go out and shoot people.
You're not answering the question. Still. Ask
Well,
a
I don't
very
have to
simple
answer the
and-
question. This is my show. I don't have to answer the question because I'm telling you from a perspective of.
You're not telling anything.
I am telling you from a
not telling
perspective
anything that I
of
don't know,
me
you're wrong.
and other
You're
millions of
talking
Americans
about
that are
that
seeing what's
like
going on in
what
this
you're
country
actually
with
a damage to black
AR-15s.
people, and it's a
Okay.
victim mentality that makes black people think that they should not have the means to defend themselves.
I
from criminals.
I never said black folks or any folks, white folks, or
And you
nobody couldn't
still
have a
get
gun.
answer-
I didn't say that. I never said anybody couldn't have a gun.
I would love to answer, get an answer
What
to this question.
I did never
because
said
you're
that no
taking
one
the
could have a
victim-
gun, but what I am saying is that it should be a ban on
Don't know
AR-15s
what you're talking
and on
about.
guns like
No.
that. Oh
What
yeah, I
you're
do
talking
know what
about
I'm talking about.
repetitive, and it is not based in the facts. It's based in your feelings. So again,
It's not
I'm
based
trying to
on
move
my. You
the
mean
facts
going
of the
out
facts
shooting? Let's
so we
see.
can move forward.
You talking about in
So again-
Philadelphia, 3
so
dead
again,
and 11 injured
I'll
last
ask
year
you again, Ms. Powell, how many times a year
at an
is
entertainment district.
gun usages?
What now?
Defensive gun use.
I have a gun.
Defensive gun usage.
I own a gun, but I don't own I don't own one of those AR-15s.
that's your personal
And I
business.
do not think that people should
How
have
many
those
times a year are there
assault
defensive gun
rifles.
usages without
You can
fatality?
define it, slice and dice it any way you want to. It is a
You're-
bad
you're
weapon,
having
and
the
no
word salad
civilian
right now.
should have
You're having
an
the word salad. What you're saying
AR-15,
is-
AR-47, or whatever.
answer the
They
question,
should
Ms.
never
Powell.
have a gun like that. I have a gun.
Okay.
I came up with
Okay.
guns.
So again,
I'm a
you
country
have a gun.
girl.
Great.
I'm
Can
a
you answer
country
my
girl. I
question?
came up with guns. So
Cool.
guns
You
are
have a gun.
fine. Guns are
All
fine.
right. So-
But the Constitution does not give a person the right to have any type of gun that they want. The
It does.
Constitution
It's
says a
wrong.
well-regulated militia being
That's
necessary
wrong.
to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But it does not
That's
say
right.
you have to have an assault weapon or AR-15 weapon to protect yourselves. It does not say that.
How many
And see,
defensive
just like
gun-
everything else is regulated, like
How many
drugs are
defensive-
regulated, those guns should be banned and regulated.
defensive gun
Fentanyl
uses
is
are-
regulated. A
How many
AR-15
defensive
should
gun
be
uses
equivalent
are there
to that
annually?
type of thing and should be regulated and
Ms.
banned.
Powell, you asked me to be on your show, and you're not allowing me.
And I appreciate you on your show, but I have a right to
defensive gun uses are there
refute
annually?
some of the
You know
things
that
that you're saying because I'm
you're
not in
not-
agreement with it, and there are millions of people not in
Do you
agreement with what you're
trust-
saying.
Ma'am, do you train?
I do not drink.
I didn't say drink. You got to listen. Do you train with firearms?
Do I do what? Oh, you saying train with firearms? Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Because you broke up, huh? Hello?
Do you train with firearms?
I don't have to train with a firearm. Why would I
Okay.
need to train with a firearm? I'm a
Okay.
country girl. I came up with around a bunch of firearms. Okay?
Do you?
I learned how to shoot a double barrel shotgun at the
That's
age
called-
of
that's
12.
called-
Okay?
that's called training.
We had guns in our house. I
Ma'am,
came up with
How many
guns.
defensive gun usages are there annually?
How many what?
Defensive gun usages are there annually?
Listen, I'm not going to answer any questions because our focus should be on having
you asked,
to
cool.
ban
So, questions that
AR-15
save
guns. I never
Let's get to
said
the
I was against guns. I said I'm against
Let me get to the
assault
questions
weapons
that
that
save
you want to
lives.
give a definition to,
get to the
but it
questions
is
that
what it
save
is.
Okay, cool.
Now
Let's
you
get to
answer the question why should a civilian
that save
have an
lives.
AR-15 gun
the questions that
and
save
leave the
lives.
police out of it?
Let's get the questions
Because
that save
one thing
lives.
about it, you don't see
questions that save
criminals
lives. Let's get to the
robbing
questions
banks
that
with
save
an AR-15. You don't
to the
see
questions that
criminals
save lives.
going out there
Let's get to the questions
burglarizing
that save
homes with AR-15s.
the
You
questions
see
that save
people that are getting
Let's
these
get to the
guns,
questions
going
that save
out,
lives.
killing
Let's get
children,
to the questions
killing
that
people,
save
minding
lives.
their own
Let's get to the
business
questions that
in
save
entertainment
lives.
districts
Let's
and
get to the
other
questions that
areas.
save lives. Let's get to the questions that save lives. Go ahead. You have the floor.
No,
What are the
you
questions-
you give me those you give me the answers. Since you want to say those things, ask those questions.
Okay.
You
So
give me
I'll go
the
for
answers.
30
Give me the
I'll go
answers
for
to
30
your
seconds.
questions.
Will you allow me as a guest on your show to go for 30 seconds without being interrupted?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, There's 500,000 defensive gun usages annually. What that means is every single year, over 500,000 times someone presents a firearm. Most of those are non-lethal and they defend life. That's the low end of defensive gun usages. The higher end is about 3 million times. Now, when we're talking about the death associated with firearms, around 30,000 of those are deaths. Again, as we discussed earlier, 60% of those are suicides. The stat game that they also play is if you use a firearm and unfortunately death happens to defend life, to stop a threat, if you use that firearm, they count that as gun violence as well. The stat game does not create the space where I say there is a way for us to have firearms safe and responsible, to lock people up that use firearms irresponsibly, and everyone, while we're cutting down on the over 60% of suicides. That's the work that we do at Black Guns Matter. So not only is that firearm safety as it relates to safe storage, safe transportation, safe handling and manipulation of firearms, but also knowing the laws in your particular city, municipality, state, or federal laws as it relates to firearms.
I gave you your 30 seconds. I need your answer. I gave you your 30 seconds. Let me ask you this. Who is committing suicide with an AR-15? Who? What statistics what type of statistics do we have out there on that? You said 60% people kill themselves or suicide with guns. What percentage of people kill themselves with AR-15s or what we call assault weapons?
There's not a term called an assault. Wait, am I allowed to speak and answer the question now?
Yeah, I just want to know how many people committing suicide with AR-15s.
Less than 1%. They use handguns.
Okay.
But
how many mass shootings are there with AR-15s?
That's a great question.
But you told me you were the gun expert.
Ma'am, if you want me to answer the question, you got to be quiet.
Well, no, you said you're the gun expert. My question is, how many people are out there go out and kill people with AR-15s?
You don't know what you're talking about. Let me answer the question.
What do you mean I don't know what I'm talking about? I'm asking you a question. You said you were the expert. You gave me less than 1% of people killing themselves with AR-15s, but you cannot tell me.
To be quiet so I can. You have a problem with being quiet. So here's the answer.
No, I don't have a problem being quiet. You have a problem because you don't want the truth.
You're asking the question.
The truth hurts you. The truth hurts you as it relates to people having an understanding of AR-15 guns.
You're still talking, ma'am. You're still talking. I'm trying to answer.
Yes, I am talking. Ma'am. This is my show. I have that right.
But the question. So. Instead of that, or we can go back to what I was just saying. So would you like an answer to your question?
Yes.
You can talk. Okay. Mass shootings with AR-15s and without. Mass shootings in America make up less than 1% of the deaths in America as it relates to firearms. I'll repeat it again. Mass shootings with AR-15s make up less than 1% of the deaths in America as it relates to guns. So if we really want to start solving this death problem, this ignorance problem that we have, we should take at where it is the most death, and that is suicides.
But why?
Next question.
But why?
Because
the issue confronting America has nothing to do with suicides. I would beg to say, unfortunately, it would be better if people do go and do something with themselves or commit suicide rather than going out killing innocent people.
Well, that's your feeling, and you're welcome.
No, that's not my feeling. That's just the way it is. That's not my feeling. When you have venues and people that's been mowed down with AR-15s and guns of those natures. You explained to me what AR-15. I'm just repeating what you said. An AR-15 is.
That has vastly superior information on the lane, but you keep talking like you know what you're talking about, and it's just.
I do know what I'm talking about. I'm not stuck on suicide. I'm talking about people getting guns, going out, shooting people in arenas that they shouldn't, and in venues that they have no business. You're fixated on suicide because that's how you're trying to justify not having control over assault weapons or AR-15s, and that's just not going to make it here. And America is not going to take that. And that's what the problem with this country is. You're trying to justify something that has nothing to do with what we're seeing taking place, and that is innocent children in schools, people in churches, people in entertainment venues, people minding their own business, and you have someone that goes out there, get a hold of an assault weapon, and nobody wants to do anything about it other than talking about 60% of people kill themselves by suicide with a gun. But that's not where we are in America. We are in America with what are we going to do about these AR-15s and these guns that are out there available and get in the hands of the wrong people, and they go out and they kill mass people. That's where we are in America. Statistics are good. Statistics are good. But what we see is reality. And the reality of everything is that it should be a ban, just like fentanyl is against the law. AR-15s should be against the law. And anybody that get a hold of one should be prosecuted for a felony. You're talking about military weapons out here killing innocent people. No civilian should have their hands on a military weapon. Okay? No one should have no civilian should have their hands on a military weapon. A military weapon that people are trained to use has no place in the average flow of society.
I muster up a certain amount of respect for someone that actually talks like they know what they're talking about and has absolutely no idea. That is the wildest thing.
It sounds like you have no idea either. Sound like you live in La La Land with statistics regarding suicide that you don't want to honor up. You don't want to honor up to the truth about what's going on with AR-15s. So, as a so-called expert, you're not really an expert. What you want to do is you want to perpetuate and propagate against sensible gun control.
Because
gun control. A ban on gun control.
Awareness and self-awareness that still is continuing after this. I'm just flabbergasted.
Well, listen, if it makes you feel good to insult me, then so be it. But I still stand on what I say. And common sense says that there should be a ban on AR-15s. These military weapons, the average person should not have their hands. Not even a hunter should have their hands on a military weapon. Why are you running? And I got a question for you. Let me ask you. I had a question. How many people? I have a question. How many what we call robbers, criminals, go out and rob, burglarize homes with AR-15s? How many criminals are doing this with AR-15s? How many? Pardon me?
What's the purpose of you asking me that?
I'm asking you that because you're the expert. I want to know. We're talking about but we don't even see the criminals with the gun. We see the average Joe getting their hand on an AR-15, going out, killing, having weapons of mass destruction. That's what we see.
Go look at the Department of Justice statistics.
I don't have to look at the Department of Justice. You're here. So that's why I'm asking you. How many real criminals use AR-15s? How many real criminals? What we call real criminals. Even in the gun violence that you see plague in Chicago and different places like that, how many people are using AR-15s in gun violence? In these cities, how many people are using AR-15s to shoot down people?
It's a bunch of babble. You're a fool.
You're a fool. Okay? That's what you are. Because you're not listening. You are narrow-minded. You think you know about guns, and you know nothing. You're stuck on stupid, and that's what you are. You are stuck on stupid about guns, and you do not know a damn thing about what you're saying, and it takes you to try to belittle me. But no, I'm using common sense, and the average person is going to use common sense. And people that have sense
can't-
are going to use
tell you,
common
man,
sense.
You're not intelligent enough to have this conversation.
No, you're not intelligent enough to even have. You're right. You're not intelligent enough to have a conversation
You
with
have another
because
question,
you
ma'am?
want to get
Yeah.
stuck on statistics that
You
are
have another question,
irrelevant to the
You have another
issue
question,
in this country.
You have
And the
another
issue
question?
in this country
You have
has to do
another
with
question,
banning
Another question?
AR-15s and
You have
assault
another question, ma'am?
rifles. Thank you for being on my show. It was interesting, very interesting. Thank you for tuning in. It was a heated show. I hope that you all can enjoy, and most of all, that you get the point. The point is that there needs to be a ban on assault weapons, on these military weapons that's killing America. Be sure and tune in to Carol P. Lexing at Instagram and CarolPowellLexingLaw.com and Carol Powell Lexing at Instagram. Until we see each other again, blessings.